Welcome to the ID10T podcast number 1134. Let's talk about you, the ID10T community, events at ID10T.com to get your thing on the corkboard. Like Chelsea, who writes about the award-winning music documentary Bleeding Audio, which has several in-person screenings coming up. The film follows the career of the art punk band The Matches and digs deeper into how the music industry has impacted artists in the digital era. It's an uplifting story about kind, hardworking artists. It's full of rock stars you would recognize like Mark Hoppus, Nick Hexum, and Cassidy Pope. Screenings include September 11th, which is Saturday, at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood, September 24th in Joshua Tree, October 13th at the Trilon Cinema in Minneapolis. Don't miss the exciting return to cinemas. To learn more about these screenings and get tickets, go to bleeding-audio.com. Fantastic events at ID10T.com for anyone else who wants to get their thing on the corkboard. This episode is Angela Kang. Angela is the showrunner for The Walking Dead, and she's just the best. So cool. And she's been a writer on the show since the beginning and is now guiding us into our final extended season of The Walking Dead all these years later. Wow. Walking Dead is currently on Sundays at 9 p.m., 8 Central on AMC, followed by all new live episodes of Talking Dead. It's so good to be back in the studio. And Angela's just the best. Just so cool and brilliant and wonderful, and is always such a great guest on our show because she'll give you just enough information, but not too much information, but it's enough where you feel like, okay, I did get a piece of information there, but nothing was spoiled. And so it's just been such a pleasure to get to know Angela all these years, and an honor to work as the cousin show to The Walking Dead. So this is a really great chat just about creativity and generating ideas and content and finding your voice and writing what you love and all this stuff. So it's a really wonderfully creative episode and there's so many enjoyable takeaways for me as I'm doing a lot of writing at the moment because I can't go out and perform. So I've been doing a lot of writing. So this was very helpful for me. I'm sure you will find it helpful for you too. And here is the ID10T podcast number 1134 with Angela Kang. Oh, P.S. Light spoiler warning. I don't think we spoil any majorly significant plot points of The Walking Dead, but honestly, I can't remember. And I know we do talk about this extended final season of The Walking Dead, and it's airing now and goes into the end of 2022. So you know what? Just to be safe, if you're not caught up on The Walking Dead and you want to wait, you don't want to have anything potentially spoiled, just go ahead and hit pause and then catch up and then come back and listen. So I just wanted to give a friendly spoiler warning for potential spoilers. So there you go. Now let's roll the thing.
Initiating ID10T protocol.
How's it going? Are you're fully in the swing now? It's July, and you're like in it.
We're in it. We're shooting right now. They're actually on set shooting right now. So oh my God, we're a third of the way through shooting the season, and then writing is just cranking along. So we've got to write 24 scripts this year, which just feels crazy. So we are almost at the halfway point of writing, which doesn't feel like enough at this stage. And then we're working on cuts, and I was looking at some VFX today. It's all in the middle of everything right now, but it's all good. I'm happy to be working. And I think everybody on the show is just this has been such a weird, hard, our time of the pandemic. So I think everybody's just at least we get to like make the show that we love and we're doing the thing. But it's hard, it's weird. It's like everybody's walking around with their masks and it's hot as hell and buggy. And so everybody's being a trooper. It's all good.
Are you shooting? How's the shooting process working? Are you shooting it all this year, or are you shooting some this year and then some next year for next fall?
The shooting is all continuous, but we started shooting in January of this year. And to finish out the season, we'll be shooting into like early spring or late winter of next year, like I get March-ish. Yeah. So it'll be over 12 months to kind of finish out the shoot for the year, which is nuts. That's unbelievable. I'm selfishly trying to calculate in my brain because literally since Talking Dead has been on, which was season 2 of Walking Dead, Greg Nicotero has said to me, "Hey man, you gotta, come on, I'll make you a zombie." I have to make up once, and it was an experience. I mean, they did an amazing job, but it was just like it's like it takes about an hour and a half, and took about a half hour to get it all off. But then in my head, I would go, okay, I'm going to do that, and then go to Georgia where it's like 100 degrees, but a muggy 110 degrees. And so I never really I always would kind of go, I'll get to it. And now, if I'm ever going to do this, it has to happen. And if it's more, because I feel like I'll regret it if I don't. I feel like why didn't I just go do it once? Come on. I know. I think I'm in the same boat. Like he's been like, come on, we can make you up and be a zombie. And I'm like, yeah, sure. But it's a time commitment. I think everybody who does the zombie stuff on our show, like it's a whole deal. But you get to be a walking work of art, like this is a real art that Greg and his team are doing. And so it's super cool. I've never really had the time to sit and do it, but I'm realizing I guess if I'm going to do it, this is probably a good year to do it. Like it's, to be a zombie one time on the Mothership show. I am tweaked out by the contact lenses, but during all of the COVID protocols, we haven't even been really doing those. Like we're just digitally doing the weird gray zombie eyes now. Oh, that's an option? Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. Contact lenses, you can't see anything. They're basically just translucent. So you can see shadows. And I have so much respect for the zombie actors on the show. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're amazing. Yeah, because it's basically just putting all these things on and around your body and then having to still be convincingly act around all of these things. It is so much harder than it looks. I think when everyone kind of does their zombie walk, it's this 1940s, movie monster walk. That's not how it is. It's harder. Yeah, it's really hard because what's interesting is I think that what actors struggle with, if there's a character that dies on the show, it's the tendency is to almost overact as a zombie. And it's as a zombie, you just have to sort of be dead to the world. Just all you're going for is food. And so, and then it's you put the emotion, it's the characters that are putting the emotion on the zombie, but the zombie itself is just rah, I want to eat your brains. Yeah. And that's actually really, really hard to do. People struggle with it. They go wait, but what's my objective and what's my feeling? It's it's none of that. You just want to eat the thing in front of you. And that's actually incredibly hard to do well. What? Excited about it, you're just doing it. That's you're just doing it. You're going after what you want. So in this case is just fresh blood, brains, organs, whatever it is. A lot of I always refer to it as sort of the clown gag with the handkerchief, but it's right, just coming out. So coming out and then doing it. I'm so curious to ask you because I was reading about, where you went to college and what you studied and how you broke into and Walking Dead. First of all, you worked on terriers, which I loved terriers. That thanks. So good.
And I remember talking to an FX executive about it years ago and saying, like, I loved Terriers. What happened? And they were like, they just said, we just didn't, I don't think we marketed it the way that it did. Like the marketing with the dog on the poster, it didn't really tell you what the show was, but it was a great show.
Oh, thanks. I mean, that show was such a cool show. There's so much that I learned from that show, and like the writing staff and like my bosses, they're just, they're all like, they're so good. You know what I mean? Like everybody was so good. And, I came onto that staff, and, I had just come right off of another job that had just kind of it never went onto the air. Like it was a super fun show to work on. And I'm still friends with a lot of these people to this day. Like they all work in big genre shows and everything like that, but never went to air. I went right onto Terriers. Like I ended that job and came on like the next like Monday or something like that. And the room had been going for like a little bit with a few people. It's like from day one that I was there, it's like, so, we're trying to come up with a new title. So we're trying to come up with a new title. And then at a certain point, it was like, it turns out FX, like they've decided that they embrace the title and they want to like go with the title. They have an idea for how to market it. But then it's like the marketing, like everybody thought the show was a show about like dog catchers. Like, or maybe like illegal gambling on dogs. I heard all kinds of things of what people thought that the show was. And I was like, oh man, like it's such a good show. But I still hear from people who there's like this kind of Venn diagram where there's some Walking Dead fans who also like passionately love Terriers. And I'm like, you get me. Like I love working on that show. It was super cool. And I'm glad there's fans to this day. Donal Lowe, by the way, like he, who starred in Terriers, he wrote this book with Danny Trejo, which is like burning up the book lists right now, which is pretty cool.
Oh, I don't know anything about it.
Huh?
I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, like it's Danny Trejo wrote like a book about his life, the actor, and those two are really tight, and I think Donal like wrote it with him or something, and I don't know why I'm like promoting somebody else's book. I just thought that was super cool. Like this is
because I remember when Terriers I've been doing the podcast so long that Terriers was on when I was first started doing the podcast, and I had Donal on the podcast because my hope was that being on the podcast would somehow save the I mean, I don't know what I thought. I just thought, if I can just help create awareness around it because it's such a good show. But I think those shows are really interesting. And I was having a similar conversation with someone about independent film because, he says, I have a friend who's in all these independent movies and they're really cool, but like not a lot of people see them. But now this one actor is like gone on to do bigger movies. And I go, because you do these really cool, if you just do cool projects that you really like, even if that's not the thing, you'll see that all of those people, because it's cool, will go on to do other things. And it's like, guy who directed this pilot now is directing this big movie. And he remembers the person that was on this small thing. And so they really are like, even though they don't necessarily become the massive tentpole successes we would want them to be, it doesn't mean that they're not important to the story of your career.
Oh yeah. Like I wouldn't give that up for anything. And it's just kind of like, it's the writers that were on that show were so good. I learned so much from them. And, Sean Ryan ran that show, and there's so much kind of like DNA of the Shield that's in The Walking Dead, So I think that's just, there's things that I learned from working for him that I carry to this day, even though that was a very different show. Everybody on that, people will go like, "What? Terrier should get back together." And I'm like, well, everybody's scattered to the winds. Like we're all doing things. Like one of the other people who like, was a staff writer with me, Leslie Headland. Like she's an amazing writer. She's running like a Star Wars show now, so we're all just like doing all our things. And, but man, that show was a blast to write. And I love stuff like that. And I think you're absolutely right. Like sometimes those things that feel really indie and small and special, they can just, they spawn other really cool work, but also like in and of itself, like it's something that I think all of us that worked on it are still really proud of, and just remember, so when I came on to Walking Dead, like I came on in season 2, and season 1 was a big success for AMC, but it wasn't like a big success in like the grand scheme of all of television at the time. Like we thought this was one of those like little small kind of scrappy indie shows. Like who knew that it would last like this long? Like I don't think anybody like could see that was what was going to be the trajectory. It's just, it's like,
not at all.
You can't tell what's going to happen. You just do it because you're like, wow, I love this. And then it's just a cherry on top if a lot of people love it too,
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing the trailer for the first episode or the first 6 episodes and just being blown away that this was a television show, because it just looked different and it felt different and it was cool. But then also thinking like, oh yeah, well this is like a horror show, so it's going to be genre. It'll probably be like a lot of stuff that I like, which is not everyone knows about it, but the right people know about it. And you kind of have that, like with terriers, and you meet people who know terriers, like, oh fuck, that's so cool.
Yeah, right.
Like part of this community. And I guess that's, but even before Talking Dead, I guess that's what I thought Walking Dead was going to be. And then all of a sudden this like, boom, boom, it just became this insane thing and really redefined like that idea of genre television. Before used to be too like, 15, no, not 10, because it's been on for almost 12, but 20 years ago, television would have been like, it's too genre, that's too narrow, we can't do that. Ironically, they would have said that's too narrow of a scope. Of course, it ends up being one of the biggest shows on television, but seeing the genreification of content and television now, and seeing like what a powerful piece of that puzzle Walking Dead was, is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's definitely cool. And I remember it's not even that long ago that, when I was in grad school at USC, like there was even at that time, just kind of like, like genre stuff. Like it's sort of like dead. Like I would be writing like assignments with like weird, like people with like jet booster things on their shoes, like going up to tops of buildings and weird horror things. And they're like, like maybe not that. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, whatever. But I don't know. I feel like it's just like these types of stories, they have this kind of staying power that I think people don't want to admit that they do. I was also an undergrad literature major, and like I loved like Edgar Allan Poe and like Gothic scary stuff. And I studied like Frankenstein. I mean, like these are things that are now considered literary classics, but those are pulp in the day too, And so I think, I don't know, people tend to like underestimate how much people like to be scared, like to be intrigued and mystified. And there's all this stuff that over time you realize like, it's just really fun to watch over and over again. It kind of works, and it allows you to like really think about the world in a way that's not so directly topical, but you can get at really big, important, like social themes through like fantasy in a way that like, if you did it directly, could feel like an after school special or whatever. That even maybe even dating myself, because like Gen Z is like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know what I'm saying?
What? After,
So, what?
After Zoom? Huh? You mean after Zoom?
Huh? But you know what I'm saying.
That was Star Trek, basically. You're I mean, like that, like Star Trek, Twilight Zone did that. Rod Serling was
my God, Twilight Zone, amazing. Still
holds up. Still, like, it's still interesting to me that 50 years later, 60 years later, a lot of the same themes are still present that you see in the Twilight Zone. But it is that idea of no matter how fantastical the storytelling is, the humanity that grounds it. It's like that is ultimately what are the human stories that even if they're extraterrestrial stories, what are the human stories at the core of it that allow that like is the sort of the way in for people to kind of relate to it and understand it.
Yeah, it's like I remember going to see E.T. And I think that might have been like, that's the second movie that I remember watching in a movie theater. There might have been others, but I would have been too young to like really recall like anything about it. But E.T. blew my freaking mind, you know? It's like, and it's so human though. It's just, it speaks so much to like childhood and the desire to like, you know, forge your own paths and make friends with people that, you know, like are outsiders. And there's so many things that are just so like sweet and human about a story like that, about like just this little like extraterrestrial being, you know. And it's just, I don't know, but it's also just entertaining. What?
All he wants is to go home. Like,
He
it's
wants to go home, man.
basic story. He wants to go home.
Go home.
The government gets in the way, and so we're going to help him because a kid knows that how important home is.
How important home is. So, I mean, you know, it's just, it's like, and I love to be scared. So I do love horror. Like, even though a lot of times The Walking Dead is like, it's sometimes horror, sometimes it's like action adventure, sometimes it's other, but it's like, it's so much of it is like a soap opera in its own way. It's very emotional, but like, you know, I think what I love about horror movies is like you get to like see the full gamut of human emotion. You know, it's like the best horror like is dealing with, you know, there can be love and fear and, you know, the will to survive and grief and all of this stuff, like triumph of human will. Like there's so much that you're exploring, so that when it like really works, like there's just you actually get to have a really, really emotional story. And I think that's the thing that I don't think people who are not into horror, like it's hard to like look at it from the outside and kind of realize that there can be this aspect of storytelling that's really like, it's just about the human spirit. I definitely am not of the kind that just likes to watch people just be like, you know, like torture porn throughout a movie. But, you know, it's just interesting. It's a fun genre. I'm definitely an outlier in my family though. It's like my sister is like, I don't like to be scared like at all, well, you know?
I would love to talk to you about your undergrad and your graduate program, because it's sort of weighing the pros and cons of, do you go to school? Do you not go to school? Like, is it important to just get out there in the world and start working the thing? Or like, what were the pros for you for doing the master's program in screenwriting? Like, what things do you think you learned that helped prepare you, or like, what are the pros and cons?
I think for me, I feel like when I look back at my life, I'm like, I feel like I was a late bloomer, you know, I feel like I'm very sort of like young at heart, and that's a good thing now. But, you know, I feel like school gave me, a kind of structure that I needed. And I was very good at school. Like, I'm a very good student. Like, I feel like I could go join a PhD program now and be perfectly like happy going down some rabbit hole of some like obscure subject and studying all day and writing papers. Like, I love doing all of that. But, you know, I think that for me, the master's program, it gave me time and just some like structure and instruction to help me like, write more and to build up my craft without having to worry about like juggling a job. I didn't go right after undergrad. There were some students that kind of came right away after undergrad. And I think that they, you know, everybody's different. And for some people, I think maybe they might have thought like, oh, maybe I should have waited, or maybe I shouldn't have gone and just kept on like trying to work or whatever. For me, it was definitely helpful because I felt like, I didn't know anybody. I was like, I don't know how to break into this. Like, where do I go? Like, what door do I knock on? Like, I don't know how to do any of this. So it helped me, meet people. It gave me like something for my resume so I could then like apply to, like one of those network programs. I went to the CBS Writers Mentoring Program, And like that directly led to me like finding my agent, and, you know, and that directly led to me getting my first job. And so it's like, it kind of, for me, it was very helpful because it also helped me hook up with an internship that I needed to like kind of gain some experience in a writer's room. But I don't think it's for everybody. It just really depends on the person. Because I think like there's plenty of people that like, if you have a point of view, like ultimately that's the major thing that I feel like you need as a writer. Like all the other stuff, like the craft of it, I mean, you can read books and you can study movies and TV and stuff. Like that's really what you kind of do. And you can learn the craft. And mainly you just have to practice. You just have to write and write and write and write and write. Like I wrote so many bad things over the course of my life. And I wrote also some good things. And I wrote in a lot of different genres. Like I was always that kid that like would win the literary contest for school for like a short story or poetry or something. And I wrote plays and short films and like all kinds of stuff. And I think like you learn to be like not too precious about it. But, you know, I definitely feel like there's a lot of people where the best path is to just work some job and keep on writing on the side and, you know, try to find your way in through like an assistantship or find somebody to mentor, apply for programs, apply for contests and like do that. But for me, I definitely think it was really helpful because it gave me connections and just that structure that really helped me kind of like get there. Like, cause I got a job like right out of school, which is not the case for everybody. You know, I feel like I was very fortunate in many ways, but it's also like I went in like with a plan of I'm going to get a job right out of school. So I don't know, a long way of saying like, I feel like it's, you know, I don't know if college is for everyone. I don't know if grad school is for everyone. I don't think it's necessary, but it can be helpful depending on your personality and your circumstances.
Yeah, because no one basically, it's maybe hard to remember sometimes that no one has to give you permission to write if you want to write.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know in our business, we can be very conditioned to think like, no, you write when someone says, okay, it is now okay for you to, I now, you know, annoy you with this writing position, yeah. You know, but the thing you said, I think is really valuable about writing so much that you don't get too precious about it. It's very similar to how you start doing stand-up. You have to do so many shows because if you only do like one show a week or two shows a month, then each show becomes very precious because it's very, you know, it's just kind of this standalone thing that you put a lot of your mental energy into. Did it go well? Oh, it didn't go well, so I didn't do well that month. But when you perform a lot or when you write a lot, you're right. Then it's like, well, this is just the process. Some stuff's going to be good. Some stuff's going to need work. Other stuff I'm not going to be excited about anymore. Some stuff might not be great, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's about, like just greasing those wheels and just getting the machine going.
Yeah, I think it's like, you know, once you become a professional writer, you just spend every day like pitching your heart out or writing things and people just kind of tell you like, I don't know. Maybe something else. You got something like that's literally like the job of a writer in a writer's room is you come in and you start pitching your heart out and go like, what about this idea? You know, it'd be really cool. It's like, da, da, da. And then like, you know, in my case, now that I'm a showrunner, I might go like, maybe let's just think about, can we put a pin in that idea? And like, what else you got? Or it's like people in the room or like people tell you no, like all the time. Or, you know, there's also a lot of like, yes, like, let's go down that path. And then everybody gets excited and like, yes. And we do this. And then we do that. And then we do that. And then you get to a brick wall and you go like, oh, fuck, we got to rewind the whole thing and start over. So it's like, you know, and then you turn things in and then the network and the studio and sometimes actors and directors, like they all weigh in on your work. And it's like, you know, as writers, like you really have to put your heart into writing. There's a craft to it, but there's also such an art to it. And there's like, I think most people who are writers that are any good are actually like very like deeply feeling individuals. So you kind of have to get over that thing of like, these are the words from my soul and my heart, and I'm going to be crushed if anybody like says that they don't like them, because like every day is a process of like, you throw out a million ideas and a lot of them are not going to make it onto the page. You save it for your pilot. Like, it's just, the
basic idea of like separating yourself from your work, like separating your ego from your work and saying like, this is a thing I do. This isn't me. It doesn't represent my value as a person.
Yeah.
But I also wonder if there are any writing programs that treat the students like a network would, where you'll just get weird notes where it's like a thing go, we have a deal with Birkenstock. Can you just write sandals in? What? This is nothing to do with this place on Wall Street. I know. We don't want the color blue and sandal. We want sandal. Like, just to give weird notes to just kind of condition them. Like, you're gonna get weird notes, or you're gonna get
weird notes.
Don't make sense to you because you don't know everything that's going on or whatever. And how can you be nimble about that?
Yeah.
And how can you try to make those things work to your advantage?
Yeah. Sometimes I think about like, things that are great works of art that are hanging in like museums. And sometimes there's just something like really weird in the painting. You go like, oh yeah, like the patron that paid for this was like, I really need you to work in my wife's dog's hat. So, you know what I mean? Like, there's just like weird, people like, what does this mean? Like, why did they paint this? And I'm like, I feel like this might've been notes. Somebody got notes.
Funny, because I'm sure there's like art students going, oh my God, what they're really saying is that like, this is really just about, the structure of the monarchy oppressing the, and it's like, nah, the patron just wanted that dog's hat in there. These people this dog had a hat and they wanted it in there because they were paying this person to paint a thing. And that's really,
I swear to God, at least there's got to be at least a percentage of that. Like, artists have always had to have somebody paying for their art, and the notes have existed forever. That's all I can say. So
fun game. The next time you go to a museum, to be like, okay, what was the note?
What's the note here?
There's a painting. The guy goes, it's great, but it needs more dog hat. I'm sorry, what? Well, I'm not seeing a hat on the dog. And I think the dog should have a hat. Well, I've already finished the painting. Well, but not really. Because I haven't do everything yet. So go put a fucking hat on this dog. Yeah. Well, when I think about the writing process, I think how fun it might be to be in a room. I love being in a room and pitching ideas, and I love the energy a room creates. Never do I ever think I would love to be a scripted showrunner. Not one time. The responsibility and because I feel like, and please correct me if I'm wrong or enlighten me, it's sort of like you get all the responsibilities of writing plus a lot of managerial components, and also having to juggle all these different components and elements, and to keep everything very cohesive from a story and a show standpoint. So when you first became showrunner, what were some of the growing pains, or what were some of the things that you did not expect that you had to learn very quickly?
I feel like what helped me along the way is that I was actually on this staff for such a long time before I took it over. So I did know some of the particularities of working on this show with the execs that we have, who are actually like really lovely execs that mostly kind of like let us do our thing and have like very good notes that help us dial some things in. I'm not saying that in case they write this, like I really do feel that way. Like we have a few longstanding execs that have just been with the show for a long time. So that was helpful. And I also knew all the actors and had kind of a relationship with most of them. So that was helpful. I think the thing that is just a shocker, even if you have been watching the process and been like the number two, as I, quote unquote, as I was on the show, is just the volume of work on any given day is just exponentially more than you'd expect. And I think like every person who's on a writing staff, like you have moments where you're just waiting for the showrunner to come in the room. And it's like, God damn it, where are they? Like, what do they do? Are they in post right now? Are they in a call? Like, where are they? Are they playing poker in their office? Like, what's happening? And then you realize it's because it's like the moment you wake up to just something on fire, like almost every day. There's just something that requires your attention. The days that I wake up and there's not like some emergency that I have to tend to, I'm just like, all right, this is going to be a good day. But there's just things that go on. There are things that you can't like predict. Even with a show that's been running as long as this one has, there's been like lots of like, various people retire, they move on to other jobs, like things happen. So there's always like people learning the show afresh. And, there'll be things like I've got a cast of 1 million people. And so sometimes it's like, they're like, I have to urgently talk to you so that I understand what I'm doing for this next episode. Or writers are like, we can't move forward on this story till you come into the room. And the post will be like, this thing is totally broken and we need to recut it. So what do you want to do? Production's like, you've got to pick this thing because it affects like 5 other episodes and we've got to lock it down now or it's going to cost $1 gajillion. So it's like every day is just some version of that. And I think, as much as you think like, I'm going to have a system for this and I can manage the day and I can do it all. And like, I've been watching this, like I'm totally on top of it. Like, there's just this element of like, it's actually like 50 jobs in one. So you just have to sort of give over to the fact that there's going to like, every day's a little different, which I love the variety of it, but it's also every day's a little different. So it's very hard to like, just be able to like plan for like from hour to hour, this is exactly what I'm doing. Cause stuff happens,
Day, you just kind of go, well, this is probably the structure of my day, but I'm going to have to be flexible because I just don't know how it's all going to play out.
Yeah. That's kind of how it is. And, especially when production's running, cause that's where it's like, I mean, as soon as the cameras start rolling, it's like money is just ticking away. It's like the sand dribbling through the hourglass and it just seems like it's going faster and faster. So it's like just stuff has this urgency to it. But I think everybody who works in this like line of business in any way, like is a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. Like, don't you think? Like everybody's a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. And there's something about the like immediacy of like, we're making it right now. That is just exciting. And it makes every day like a fun new day. And, ultimately we get to like see our imaginations like come to life. And so there's something satisfying about that. And so you kind of go like, all right, well, if today's a crazy day, so be it. Because at the end of it, here's this thing that I was like picturing in my silly little brain. And now there it is.
I mean, nothing more motivating than a deadline, How many times in school did you have like 3 weeks to do an essay, but then the night before, you know what I mean? And then you go, God damn it, I could have if I spent 10 minutes a day on this for the last few weeks, it would have been done with no stress. Like, yeah. Now you're like trying to get to the library 5 minutes before it closes. The book you need is checked out. You got to,
Oh my God.
Yeah. In the pre-internet days. But I sort of understand about the decision-making process when you are called upon to make fast decisions that you weren't necessarily thinking about. I'm fascinated about this because I like to make conceptual decisions, but I'm very bad at specifics. So an example is, and this is sort of like making decisions on a set, but my wife and I are renovating a place and I go, it'd be really cool if the railing on the patio was wrought iron. And she'll go, great. But I don't think specifically about what kind of wrought iron or what the design is about. And so then it's like, I don't know. I just thought of wrought iron. And then, so I'll go to my wife, who's very good at making snap decisions. And she'll go the twisty one. I'll go, great. Okay, great.
Yeah.
But alone, if I didn't have her, I think I'd be like, gosh, I don't know. And I don't know if I would ever know. So when you are called upon to make very specific decisions in the moment, do you sometimes just go B, or do you really kind of have everything kind of mapped out in your head? Like, is there a particular process by which you're able to default to things to make that easier?
I think so. I think for me, I'm very opinionated in certain directions, and I have a certainty of like, this feels right or this feels wrong. And I'm like, when I know I'm in a decisive zone on something, like I can very quickly go like yes or no. And so everybody can move on. But I also know that like you, there's certain realms where I'm like, I can totally give the conceptual thing. But when it comes to which wrought iron is it, yeah. I'm like, I look at it, and if it starts to take me too long to decide, I'll be like, you know what? All of these are okay with me. The director or the writer or like whoever's involved can decide, like the department head can decide. And so it's just like, for me, like I've just gained a sense of like what I can decide quickly versus what is going to be a waste of time and is ultimately like not really going to move the needle too much in any one direction. And those I try to like in the moment go like, I don't need to decide that one. So it's the only way, because otherwise, like, I think everything would be held up by me kind of fumfering about like, do I like this one that's like slightly skinnier or this one that's slightly fatter? Because I can go down that rabbit hole, but it's not good, you know? So the things that I'm like, this is important that I personally like weigh in on this, I will do that, and I'll do so decisively. And if not, I'm just like, that one's not for me. Like broadly, these are all okay. So
but that's what's so hard, is that sometimes there's no real right answer for everything, in the sense that sometimes like really cool details make a thing. Oh, yes. Wow, it was really cool.
Yeah.
Other times, you know, you can smack your head against the wall trying to come up with the right, and you go, I don't know, just that one. And it works fine. And it's like, it wouldn't have made a difference no matter what, but you just never know which is which. And that's where it gets like, you know, yeah. You don't want to hamper yourself with, I don't know, perfectionism or thinking that, you know, because I don't know if there is any real perfect way. There are just paths. Some paths are better than others, but they're different. One, you know, a skinnier iron will take you down one path maybe, and a fatter iron will take you down a different one. But is one better than, I don't know. Like that can hold you up forever.
Yeah, it can hold you up forever. I am a person who, I like a restaurant menu that's got like 5 things on it. Yeah. Like I get frozen in indecision with like a Cheesecake Factory size menu.
And that's all of entertainment right now, by the way.
Yes.
Going to, you know, as all of the mega companies are becoming super mega companies and like piling up so that they can create all this library content, you go into like a streaming app and you're like, I don't know. And your whole night is just like watching trailers autoplay. You're like, I have no fucking idea. I have no idea.
I think there's going to be like a return to just the importance of like curation for people. So just a couple of the early jobs I had was, so I worked at this place called the CD Listening Company when I was a teenager. And it was like a record store employee. And it was at the time when it was like, they had like it was literally like a bar, and they set up like listening stations for CDs. And this was before some of the big chains started doing that. But this is back when, you know, you couldn't just have every piece of music ever created, like just on your phone at all times. But the thing that I got from that, and the thing that I got from like, I waitressed when I was in an undergrad and also like a bit afterwards, like people actually do want you to tell them what to listen to or what to eat or whatever. So your job as like a record shop employee is when somebody comes and goes like, hey, like I really like this band, or like I'm looking for something that's whatever. You just go like, you should try X, Y, and Z. Like, you know what you're going to like is this. And people like that. And it's not like just trying to upsell. Like I'm very, very bad at like selling, and I feel weird about that. But it's just that like, I think people, they like human suggestions. I think sometimes the algorithm is helpful, but the algorithm can also feel very cold and impersonal and like slightly off in a weird way.
Yes.
So it's like, it's really nice sometimes to just have a human being tell you, like, based on what I know of you, which is admittedly little, I think you might like these things. And even if you're slightly off, you're bound to find something kind of interesting. And I just, like, I want somebody to tell me, like, what are my next 5 TV shows and movies to watch? Because it's like, I've got a list of like 1,000 things that I feel like I'm behind on watching. And that's ultimately like what's breaking us all. There's too much choice. I'm glad there's choice. And I'm glad that there's like types of entertainment that like might have been more rare, like 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Like, that's all good. But it's like, it just, I don't know. I do find myself, if I go on Netflix and I'm like, oh, I've got like 40 minutes to watch a thing, I spend like 25 of them flipping through going like, I don't know which thing should I watch. So then I just watch like a sketch because like that's simple and portable, you know.
Just go on to YouTube and watch something. Well, but
yeah, that's right.
I was wondering, like, should I start a service that's basically like a human curation service?
I've literally thought about this. I'm like, there needs to be a human curate. Like, yeah, it's like you want to be able to call in.
You know that you like, you know, you check off the boxes like, well, I like horror, I like comedy, I like sci-fi, and then, you know, then you connect with a person who is watching and go, hey, well, I like this and I like this and I like this. Check this out and check that out. You can talk to them or like, you know, ask them questions about it. I honestly think that would, I don't know if it would be the biggest thing in the world, but I think it would do well.
I literally like said this to my husband before. I'm like, this would be a good business. Like, it would not be like the size of Amazon, but it would be, I think, a self-sustaining little niche business. Like, just imagine everybody who would have been like a record store employee or a bookstore employee or like a video store employee. Like, you could just connect to one of those people and talk about what kind of stuff you like. And maybe you find something good and maybe you just have a good conversation about like art, you know, but I feel like that's something that's missing from the algorithms.
Oh my God, this is such a great idea. I would not know how to manifest something like this, but I do think it is a staff of, you're exactly right. It's like people who maybe lost their jobs because of brick and mortar businesses going under. And it's like this person worked at a bookstore for a long time, or this person worked at a record store for a long time. And then they just become like, you like rent a cool friend who is basically like an employee of some type of media store. And they just go, yeah, you know, I liked this. I thought this was pretty cool. Have you ever heard of this? No. Well, you should check that out. This is a little outside the realm, but you might like it, you know. And then it just gives you, because what I feel like is so limiting with the algorithm is, you know, if you click on one thing, you're like, shit, now I'm going to get like 50 of this. And maybe this was just, you know, one thing that I wanted to watch. And
yes.
I don't need to watch 100 of it.
Yeah, it skews the direction of the thing. I also find that like, you know, my taste is pretty varied, but sometimes like I'm in a zone where I'm watching a certain type of thing. And a lot of times I'm watching things because like, I'm like, you know what, I'm working on this type of story and I just want to watch examples of this type of story. But it actually like limits the other types of things that I discover. So if you feel it funneling you into a rabbit hole, whereas I actually think like a human being would go like, what do you feel like you're missing? And might point you to something that you discover that's like really new and interesting, you know, without it being totally random. But I don't know, maybe I'm also like, I love tech. And so I'm definitely not like anti having tools that like help us do things, but I don't know. I feel like we're at some sort of like weird tipping point where I think like a human touch is like desired by a lot of us, and where it just feels like there's just too much. It's overloading our brains. It's too hard. It's not relaxing anymore to like try to relax, you know?
That is a psychological principle, that too much choice is stressful, because the more choices you add, it creates this little fear inside of us, this primitive fear that we're going to make the wrong decision.
Yeah.
And even if it's something as, you know, like non-life threatening as what movie you're going to watch, you still have that feeling of like you watch a trailer for 20 seconds and you go, oh, I don't know. When in reality, it's like, well, you could just start watching, and if you don't like it, you watch something else. In that leap, you feel like, oh, did we want to watch this? I don't know. It's like the lighting is weird and it seems, I don't know, rather than, taking the chance that you might like it. So I do think that can be very limiting.
Yeah, I feel that way if I have to buy something. Like, I can't even buy anything anymore. It's like you feel like you have to research everything and get the very best version of whatever widget. And it's like,
oh, 2 people get this 1 star. Oh, shit.
It's like, did I need to spend an hour like researching something that really I like could have just bought any version of it and it would have been fine? Like,
do I need to go down the Amazon review hole of earplugs?
Yes.
They're $8. I'll just try them.
Yeah, it's $8.
If they don't work, I'll get some other ones. It's like, I don't know. Are these the best ones? Do they really block out sound? Does it irritate you? So yeah, we are definitely. There's just so much busy work involved.
Yeah.
It's like the busy work. It's like all the busy work. It's like consumerism has homework now. It's like, it's not just, you should just buy stuff. And now it's fucking homework. Like we're writing dissertations.
It's fucking homework. Yeah. Everything's fucking homework is what it comes down to. I literally picked a job where I have homework every day. Like, I explained to my kid, he's like, why aren't you done with work? I'm like, okay, well, this is like my grown-up homework. And he's just like, oh, he's like, I'm not going to college. Like I'm like, okay, you're 8, but we'll see. So
he already knows. He's like, no, he's down with homework. Well, let's talk about the job that you have homework for in the remaining time, because it is weird. I know we've talked about this before, but I do keep putting off the feeling of like, well, it is the final season, because it doesn't feel, just because of the way it's being parsed out, it doesn't feel that way, even though from your point of view, it probably does. But from my viewing point of view, it's like, oh, we got 8 episodes in the fall and there's 16 next year that'll be broken up into chunks of 8s, and so there's still plenty of time. But can you just talk a little bit about the feeling or the responsibility of like how to land this plane? Like what goes into that, and do you even think about that, or is it just too much to even take on emotionally? You just kind of take it a little bit at a time.
I mean, just on the writing side, because we're always thinking in terms of like a long arc, we have definitely had to think about like, how do we end this, and like what are the events that we need to like lead up to it. But at the same time, 24 is such a large, overwhelming chunk that we had to kind of like think about, here's what we think is the major arc and some of the things along the way. And then now let's like segment it into the way that it airs, which is sort of in thirds. And then it's like, let's work on this little mini arc here and then this mini arc here, while still kind of keeping an eye on the whole thing. It's daunting. Like, I think it feels like a lot of episodes and not enough at the same time, because there's so many stories that like you could tell with these characters. It just feels like there's so, like, some of these characters, I'm like, I feel like we're just barely getting started with them and we got to like land it all. So, I have great fear of failure all the time. I think, as does like everybody who's like involved with the show. We're all like, we just want to do a good job because we're so invested in this show and these characters, and the fans have just been so like awesome and loyal, and the ones that have like really stuck with us for all these years. So I don't know. That's all to say that like I feel high anxiety every day, but we're just trying to do it. Like, I think since we're running and production's running, it's like there is just this like clock to every single day, like, because the next script has to come out and then the next script has to come out. So it doesn't really allow you the time to get too in your head, because at a certain point, like, something has to be made. you know, and you still want it to be good. So we're just trying to stay enough ahead of the train of production to make sure that we're not having to rush things out where it doesn't feel like it's good quality. But that's just always the reality of working in television. It's just that like this season has like supersized itself. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know if that like answers your question. Like, I think in terms of like emotions about the season, like, I think a lot of us that are in it, we're just kind of like, we have so much road ahead of us, that there's moments where I think people feel kind of sad or there's bittersweetness or whatever. But I have a feeling that's more for the end, because right now we're all just like right smack in the middle of it. And you have a job to do. So you kind of like, I think like many of our characters, you kind of just buckle up and like, you know, start doing your job, and you got to like fight your way through it, you know, because it's hard work. It's hard work for everybody, like in a good way. You know, it's like we all enjoy the work, but it's like you got people like standing around in the heat with these like, you know, armored costumes and people running around with zombie makeup. And, you know, we're just cranking on the writing side, like every department's like cranking away, building things, you know, try to paste everything together in post. And it's like every single person just has so much to do. So in some ways, like that kind of keeps you from the more philosophical side of it right now, because that tends to just kick in like when you're a little closer to the moment.
Right,
you
right.
know?
But I also like, you know, I mean, we're saying season 11, but really 12 seasons, really 12 years.
Yeah.
That, you know, you look at a show like Breaking Bad and you go, okay, well, it was really just like one core. It was a guy, his family, and then his friend. Like, but it was basically just like one tiny core story. And there were other storylines. There were other storylines that had to wrap up. But really, it's this 5-season arc. You know, what happens to this guy and the people in his immediate circle, versus 12 seasons of a show. And now also on top of that, this giant open universe that's expanded from the show. So it's not just Walking Dead. It's like this whole other thing, and the CRM, and where's Rick Grimes, and, you know, like there's a movie connect, there's other shows coming out, there's other stories to be told. And, you know, and as far as I know, you're going to show run the Carol and Daryl show, I think, at least according to the internet.
At least according to what I know. We'll see, you know, you never know with development, but yeah, as far as I know.
But that idea is that like the show is ending, but the universe isn't ending. So that's kind of an odd element too. I mean, this is such unique, rare television ground, you know, like there's a lot of precedent for it.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, like I said, I don't think when I came in, like I had no sense that this would spawn this whole franchise. I just knew that these were comic books that I liked, and I loved the first season. And, you know, I was like, well, if you get a couple seasons of work out of it, like, that's great. You get to write a cool zombie show. And I think that there is something that's so rich about this world. And I think that zombies, there's just something about zombie stories that lets you tell just really interesting stories about the human condition and about, like, I don't know, about government sometimes, like all kinds of things. Like zombie stories just tend to have this sort of like interesting social and philosophical element, I find, like of the horror, you know, subgenres or whatever. And I think, you know, there's these characters that we've always written to be like a little larger than life because that it's taken from the comic, but also that we've tried to ground in like real human emotion and like relationships. And, you know, it's like when you're so based in character, humans always have so much variation to what they do. So it does allow you like a lot of room to play. And I think it's like, since I'm not in charge of like the universe part of it, like I tend to just sort of focus on like what I'm doing in my particular lane. But it does feel like there's so many different ways you can interpret things, but also it's just, there's so many people where, you know, on the Mothership Walking Dead show, there's like a gazillion characters, but if you were to just focus in on like any one person, you could tell a whole arc for like that person and, have a really satisfying story. So, all that to say, like, it's kind of like, it's really cool and fun. I didn't think that this would be like a franchise, but here we are, and it's cool to be part of it.
Yeah. And then, and also being able to tell these stories. And I constantly say, I've said to you many times on our show and probably on the Comic-Con panel too, that as difficult as shooting around the pandemic was, what an interesting opportunity to be able to, like you were saying, because there's so many characters, just really focus in on a couple of intimate stories that the environment sort of, and the way that we had to sort of navigate the pandemic really kind of dictated how the stories are going to be told. But I think that actually benefited the show and benefited, me as a viewer. So I get to see these like really dense verticals of singular characters and what they were going through, which I think is, very helpful going forward. I mean, again, that last Negan story was so incredible and do you think a story like that would have happened if there were no pandemic and it was just sort of business as usual? I'm sure there would have been a Here's Negan episode, but would it have been told in that way?
I think not. I think, we always thought Here's Negan would be more expansive. And I think that story, it probably would have been part of some other story that was going on. It was really fun to be able to just do here's Negan thing. Like, let's really focus in on him and his wife, because we had to keep the cast small. And that wound up being like really special for us. And we love doing stories that are just sort of like focused on like a small number of characters, but we're trying to balance so many different people that we so rarely actually get to do that. And I think for us as writers, that's always really satisfying. And I know the actors really enjoy those episodes too, because they just get to like sink their teeth into like a really meaty acting challenge. And, certainly like Jeffrey he's such a great actor with so much range. And it was really fun to see him do, and Here's Negan, like run the gamut from like, just, almost like a man-child who's sort of shirking responsibility to like the guy who's like really tender and like trying to take care of his wife, to the start of villain Negan, like, to post-villain Negan trying to like find like a spot of redemption, like all of that stuff, like he got to play in one episode. And normally, like, you wouldn't get to do that as an actor. Like, we do try to write some of those episodes where it's like people get to go through something, but he got to touch on so many different versions of that character's sort of like journey that, and that's really fun to write too. It's and like fun to get to dive in that deep.
It was Hillary was so great too.
She's so great.
Such an amazing piece of casting, because you could really feel this very authentic and organic shorthand that they had with each other, and how connected they were. And it was such a great, it was just such a great piece of television and such a great part of the universe. And moving ahead, jumping back into big stories again, and, lots of zombies and lots of characters and stuff, do you have sort of like even though you're going like chunks of 8 episodes at a time, do you have like a giant board of note cards that's like, here's kind of what we accomplish in this first 8, and then the second 8, and then the third 8, and then obviously as you get closer, you'll start to figure out like the details and the dialogue and the writing and all that. But in general, do you feel like you have it pretty well mapped out from this point?
Oh yeah. I mean, we had to pitch it to AMC. So we mapped out like every episode, like in a fair amount of detail. There's stuff that like definitely once we get to each episode, we have to like work out beat by beat. We don't have every single beat in every single scene. And sometimes things shift as we get into it. But yeah, I mean, we pitched all the way through the entire season, for all the way up to the top of the company. And so, it's just like, everybody's taking it very seriously. So there's no kind of like, we're going to wing it and see where it lands. They're like, they started just calling up my office to go in like our virtual office. Like, so when are we going to hear the pitch? So when are we going to hear the pitch? Are we going to hear the pitch soon? We're going to hear the pitch. What are you planning for the end of the season? What are you planning for the end of the season? What are you planning? What are you planning? And we're like, we're working on it. I swear to God, we're working on it. Like, I'm not trying to hide anything from you. I'm not going to like not tell you, not going to like throw some twist you weren't expecting. Like, we are just literally working on it because our whole schedule is upside down. And I exaggerate, but only a little. they all want to hear, But they were very, very supportive and cool. So like, I'm not saying that to complain. Like they're actually like, everybody was very, very supportive of what we kind of laid out. But, it's like, we're just trying to juggle everything because we're on a schedule we've never been on in like a decade because of the pandemic shifted everything around. So it just made everything kind of like sit on top of each other in a weird way. But so the short answer to your question is we do have a board. It's virtual this year, but it is filled with tons of cards that stretch across the entire season. And then we go in and flesh it out.
The show ends, I imagine, with Daryl's dog in a hat, right? Is that ultimately? Probably.
That's nice. I see what you did there. It's like it's like we've got, like, we pitched out what we think is the final seed and the whole shebang. So,
oh my God.
We'll see how it all lands.
What was always, it was, you've always been so great on Talking Dead every time, like right.
Oh my God. I don't feel like I am. I feel like an idiot.
And the reason that you are is because you've been involved with the show for so long and you're such a fan of the genre, and you are a fan of, I know you would watch the show if you weren't working on it.
Oh, 100%. 100%. This is my jam.
You have this fan perspective, but also as a showrunner, I feel like you do this really great balancing act of giving enough away that is like, that is engaging, but then not giving away, but not spoiling anything. And so I've always wanted to know, like, what is going on in your head when I ask you questions that you can't really, and I know I ask fucking questions that cannot be answered. What do you think is and you could just go like, just watch the show, but you do a great job of going, here's some information that, that dances around what you're saying, and I always kind of feel satisfied with that. So what's going on in your head to create this balance, which I know is very difficult?
So I don't know if I can really explain it. I just have a sense of like, because I'm a fan of this stuff, I'm just going to give a random example. This is like not the only thing that like I've done this with, but like I loved Lost. I watched every episode of Lost, right? And that was really like one of those shows that like where the transmedia aspect of like, you want to go online and all of that, like that was important. And there was some kind of engagement on message boards and stuff. So occasionally I would go online because I'm like, I'm dying to know. And I've got a theory about this thing. And I want to know, but I only want to know like a little bit. I don't want to like totally get into spoiler territory. But it's like, I just have a sense as a genre fan of like, if this was me asking the question, I don't know that I actually want the entire direct answer. Like that might upset me. I just want enough to kind of like validate like the fact that I'm thinking about it. And so I'm honestly making it up as they go along, but I just sometimes have an internal sense of like, I can give a little bit more here, but this I should not talk about. Or you know what I mean? So yep. It's completely instinct and I'm making it up as I go, but it's based on my own experiences of like being a fan of stuff or like looking up stuff about the Star Wars universe or like whatever. Like sometimes you just want like a little bit of information, but there's times where I'm like, wow, that was way too much. I don't want that spoiled. Like, I don't want that spoiled at all. So I'm trying to dance around that line. It's more of my own internal line of what feels like enough to give or not. But sometimes I screw it up and everybody's got a different threshold because there's people that are like, I'll give some weird like halfway answer and they're like, you said way too much. way too much. And I'm like, I'm sorry, so.
Well, yeah, because like, I don't think after that first season of Lost, of course I wanted to know where the polar bear was coming from, but also not at the same time. And
Yeah.
some things should be explained, and other things like, I don't, for like the Star Wars universe, it's like, well, I don't know if I necessarily needed to know the science behind the Force.
I didn't need to know that. I was good with it being the Force.
But then there were other things that it's like, oh yeah, but that I want explained. So I guess there's no real across the board answer.
No, it's subjective. It's just totally subjective. Yeah.
What are you right now looking forward? And I know I asked you this I've asked you this a million times, but just for people who haven't seen Talking Dead or whatever, and are just listening to the podcast, what is the thing that is motivating you and exciting you about season 11?
I'm excited about, and I don't know, it changes day to day. I think that there's a few things that just come to mind right now. Like, one is we got to really start the season with a big bang and like just big fun action sequences, and not that that's like the only thing that matters in the show, or even that it's the most important thing, but it is fun. And like, I think that that's part of like the feeling of like getting to like watch a little movie in your home, like when you sit down and watch this show, that was really fun to get back into, so that is really cool. We had some really cool directors that are in this season, and I think they've done like some really, really cool work. And I'm excited for that stuff. I'm definitely excited for anytime we get to intro like a new community, that just gets to like bring new characters and new types of storylines and new types of like tension and conflict. So I'm excited to kind of like intro the next new big community. I think that there's just lots of really cool scenes that some of our actors do that I'm just blown away by people's acting. Like they just do a really great job. And I think it's like, it's easy to overlook that sometimes because it's like, it's a zombie show, but there's some really, really deep work that people have done that I just think is like really fun to watch, just from like a standpoint of like, they're doing this really like emotional, difficult, fraught stuff. So I'm looking forward to people watching it, because it's like a lot of times when I'm watching cuts come in, I am trying to think of it as like, I do my first watch just like a fan, like not taking like too many notes, like going like, what's the flow of this? And like, ooh, like where does it feel like exciting? Where is it feeling a little slow, or where is it confusing, and things like that. So, and then there's times where I just sit back and get a little lost in what people are doing. And it's not to like pat myself on the back, because I'm really like, at that point, I detach myself and go like, oh, the writer who wrote this episode and the people who were on the ground making it, like kind of created something that's really special. Like, and so those moments are always really satisfying for me. And those are the moments that I get excited to like show the fans, because it's like I have a good instinct sometimes. I'm like, people are going to freak out about this scene. So, I don't know. It's the realm of it all.
And then finally, I personally am looking for some good writing advice. And I know that write a lot, don't be precious is something that we covered. But just in terms of, is there more to it than that? Like trying to discover your own voice, or at least, I have an idea for a movie, like a low budget horror movie, just some good advice for like mapping it out. Do you do like a 1 page and then expand that to like a 2-page breakdown and then do scene structures? Or do you just dive in and start writing, fade in, blah, this happens, this happens? Like, what part of the process do you do that in? And, also just other good writing advice for kind of plowing through a script?
I think like when I used to like write stuff more like short stories or plays and things like that, and when I was younger, I did used to just plow in and go a lot off of instinct, but because for certain formats, I feel like that works. But I feel like if you're writing something like a movie, there's just so many pages you have to get through. And so if you kind of go down like a funky path, it can be really hard to get like 60 pages in and go like, I got to rewind that. So I definitely like, and for our show and everything, and for anything that I'm like trying to develop or whatever, do try to kind of figure out a roadmap. But, I think it's helpful to just talk about like scenes that excite you. Like a lot of times I'm just like, it'd be a really great scene is like, these two people like doing this thing, or like what's an interesting scenario to put them in. But then I don't, it's like, I think a lot about like what people would do in situations. So you've got to do a little bit of like, I don't know what you call this, but you burn it at both ends. Like it's helpful to know like what you're trying to land at, but it's also helpful to know where your characters are starting. And you just kind of go like, all right, well, these two people have been through this and they feel this, and this is what they start going through. And what would you do in those situations? And it's like, you try to put them in hard situations, because I think that's where you get like really, really interesting scenes. And then you're hopefully pointing them in a direction that works. Like I'm also open to sometimes like on the show, like we'll be like, oh, we think this episode ends here. But then like we start doing the character paths and you're putting them in these really interesting situations. And sometimes we go like, actually, that ending doesn't feel totally right now. So I'm open to changing. I think other people are a little more like rigid about like where they want to go. It's all like so dependent on the person. But I definitely like to have a roadmap. But sometimes in the road mapping, I think it's good to have a little flexibility to sometimes break out and go like, I just want to write this one scene and see how this scene goes. And then maybe that gives you ideas that feed back into the map, or it changes the map. I don't know if that's helpful at all. There's definitely more technical things that I could get into, like, which is more like ways that we learned at USC to like break down the sequences of a movie. Like you break it into 8 and like each sequence, like you're kind of doing this and that. And, it is helpful to break into smaller segments. I'll say that, because then you're kind of like doing a chunk at a time rather than like a giant thing. That's always helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I think coming up with that, like if you kind of know what your general story is, that's great advice of just making a list of like, what are some cool scenes that you like? How do they fit in? How would they sequence? Do they make sense? Even if you like it, you have to be willing to let it go if it doesn't serve the story, which I know is hard to do sometimes.
Yeah. You know what I do? Like, this is I don't know if you do this at all or other people, but I like, it can be so painful to like let go of something. Like I could see myself, if I wasn't careful, becoming a total hoarder. So that is true of writing too. So like I create like what I call like my scratch file, and a lot of writers use some version of this trick. But anytime like I've written something and I'm like, oh, I really love this, I don't want to let it go, I'll just cut it and paste it into this other file. So then I'm like, oh, it's not really gone. It's just in this other file. I could always use it again if I want to. It just psychologically helps me let go of things, because sometimes you have to, as they say, kill your babies when you're writing. Yeah. But that just helps me kind of keep moving when I'm just having a hard time letting go of something that I know I need to let go of, Yeah,
and it's much easier to hoard in a scratch file.
That's right.
Really take up any space, and you also, those ideas could turn up at any time later on. Right. You got to go back and look every so often, right? Just go, oh my God, I forgot about this. Is really cool, and weirdly, it serves this thing I'm doing now, so I'm just gonna drop it in here.
That happens on shows a lot. Like we've totally used things on The Walking Dead where it's like somebody like pitches something great, but it doesn't fit into what you're doing. There's things that came back around like 2 years later or whatever. You're like, remember that one time we talked about this thing? And then it totally comes back around. Like Head in a Bag, which opened, I want to say season 4. was that the season 4 premiere where Rick meets this woman in the woods and she's like, come with me, like my husband. And the husband was like, he was dead and it was his head in a bag. That idea was pitched in a completely different context, like in season 2. I want to say like Kirkman was like, oh, maybe there's a guy with like carrying a head in a bag. And then it turned into this actually like really like wonderful, emotional story. But that happens on the show. It's like, it's the version of the scratch file. You're like waiting for story ideas and you go like, remember that thing that like did not make sense at the time? What if you do it here? And sometimes it works like gangbusters. So,
wait, I totally could see. I felt like a Kirkman impersonator with your, what about a guy with a head in a bag? You know, like that's totally. And I think if I make my scratch file, I'm going to call it head in a bag.
Head in a bag is your file.
To this wonderful conversation that we've had. I cannot thank you enough. You've always been so generous with your time, and it's just been so wonderful to get to know you on this, fun, surreal journey that we've all been on for a decade, 11 years.
For real.
I appreciate it so much. And I'm so excited to see you on our show when Walking Dead is back. And then I'm sure I will have tears next year.
Yeah.
How can you not when you've fundamentally changed your life and have given you so many great experiences? And it's I understand this is how television works, but doesn't mean that it won't be sad. So I'm just deferring it. I'm just deferring it until
I know.
Here. Not even thinking about it now.
Yeah, me too. I'm a big crybaby, so there's going to be so many tears. But right now, just work. But thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's fun.
Thank you so much. It's been so great talking to you, and I'll see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon. It's super fun.
The end of this episode, not of The Walking Dead, which is still quite a ways away. All right.
ID10T scanning complete. Enjoy your burrito.